ready. Hold on, let me just press.
It'll be another $50 million project we got.
Okay, I'm ready. All right, welcome everyone to the April, I had to look what month it was, Citizen Involvement Committee meeting. We will start with roll from Dennis and reminding that he just calls out the neighborhood and then you just say your name so we know who is here.
Okay. Kanema.
We're here.
You gotta say it for the microphone.
Oh, we're here.
Say, Linda.
Three Rivers. Gaffney Lane.
Amy.
Park Place. Hillendale.
Roy Harris.
Tower Vista.
Here.
That would be Vern Johnson.
McLaughlin.
James King.
Tonight's James's first night, welcome.
Thank you.
Rivercrest.
Karen Maury.
Caulfield.
Mike Mitchell.
Berkeley Hills.
Janice Morris.
Okay.
All right, great, thank you. And we'll start with Pete, giving us an update on the equitable housing.
Thank you. I understand I only have 15 minutes, so I'm going to skip through this fairly quickly. I've got 28 slides. And please, by all means, if I have skipped over anything that you want me to elaborate on, I would strongly encourage you to call me or talk to me afterwards. But the Equitable Housing Project has been going on for approximately 8 months now. So since January 2016, when the City Commission prioritized affordable and equitable housing as one of our goals. We got a grant from Metro to do this project. We've hired a consultant, 3J and Jet Planning, and we anticipate that the project will run through November 2018, which is when we're scoped to take this through to the end of the public hearing process. So the goal that the City Commission adopted with respect to this is to work with the regional partners to identify tools and programs to increase affordable housing and housing affordability, and also to review our local regulations and processes to remove barriers and provide incentives to additional housing opportunities. So as you probably all know, the metro area is experiencing a pretty significant housing shortage, and it's resulting in a lot of households being what they call cost burdened. This chart demonstrates that approximately in our city, between renters and homeowners, there's about 27% of our households that are paying more than 35% of their income either in rent or mortgage for housing, and that's considered a significant burden. Related to that is the issue of homelessness. There's some stats here. There was a 2017 homeless count of 322 individuals experiencing homelessness in Oregon City. 186 of those are under 18. And the school district has seen a 93% increase in homeless student population in 10 years. And top reasons for those experiencing homelessness are rents being too high and unemployment and eviction. So while not all of those things are something that we can tackle in the planning department because they're big social problems, the problem that we're trying to tackle through this project is the lack of equitable housing, a lack of housing choices, and an increase in homelessness that's related to that. And how do we intend to do that? We want to try to facilitate the development of more housing, more types of housing, and the development of more equitable housing. So that's all related to diversity. And the project goal is to remove regulatory barriers to these types of housing by doing three main things. First is look at greater flexibility in zoning and development regulations. Second is producing educational materials to facilitate a transparent development review process. So that's including brochures for home builders and homeowners to tell them this is how you would get to build an accessory dwelling unit or something in your neighborhood. And here's what it might cost you. We're going to give people the tools that they need to figure out what their costs are going to be to determine whether it's going to be feasible for them. And we're also doing a mapping project to look at opportunity sites throughout the city. We're guided in this process by a project advisory team. It's 15 citizens who applied for these positions and are appointed by the mayor. Steve Van Haverbeek and Amy are our CIC representatives. So thank you for all the work that you're doing. All our meetings are open to the public, and the committee provides a variety of perspectives on these codes amendments that we're doing. It's a lot of material for the committees to get to, and we try hard to distill and summarize what we're doing, but it really is a lot of complicated code stuff that we're asking this committee to look at. So what we're really getting out of the project advisory team is a way to implement our public involvement and engage broader Oregon City constituencies, communities, and civic organizations. Photo on the right here is from our first meeting back in October 2017. We also have a technical advisory team, which is mostly agency staff from Clackamas County, Metro staff. We have our consultants, and we have a developer of regulated affordable housing and a small home builder that serve to give some of their experience and technical input. And their meetings are the same day as the project advisory team meetings. They're just a little bit earlier. So what have we done so far? We have completed what's called a code and policy audit, where we look through the entire development code and look at all the chapters that relate to development and look at possibilities for streamlining. Where are areas that are clearly problems? There were some interviews with development community related to that, and then we gave that initially to the project advisory team to look at. And then we've done 2 of 3 rounds of code amendments at this point. And I'll go briefly into what those are later. And the last meeting was just last month, March. And the next step for us is going to be doing a housing opportunity mapping, so that we're using our zoning maps. We're going to provide a much more simple map for people to look at that would tell them, okay, so you want to build a corner duplex, or you want to build a triplex or some kind of housing unit in your neighborhood. Here's where you can do it. Not, this is your zone, go look for it, but really, really try to simplify that. So that would be a mapping process.
I have a question right there if we could.
Yeah.
How does, I know we've talked about this before, but with the HOAs and CCNRs, how does that play in when somebody comes in and applies? Do you, before they even come to you, are they to know that? Do you have a way to help them know that?
Well, it's probably one of the questions that we're going to put into our educational materials is like, check with your HOA to make sure that this is going to fly first, because that's not something the city can regulate or require. It's going to be a completely different thing that they need to check on. So yeah, that would be part of the due diligence, and that's a really good point. Yeah. So that would go into the informational packet. And then we'll go into final plan and adoption process, I believe, in August, and it could go for a while through the Planning Commission and City Commission. So round 1, we looked at what we call the low and medium residential use areas in our city. And I'm not going to go into detail on all the zoning districts that we have, but we have 6 zoning districts, and 3 of those are low density and 2 of them are medium density. And what we're looking at is expanding the permitted housing types appropriate to each zone. And I'll go into what those might be. We're looking at the dimensional standards and density standards for those. We looked at design standards, which is how these buildings ought to look architecturally and what their maximum size can be and that sort of thing. And we're looking at townhome and design standards as well. And we currently don't have townhome design standards. We have residential design standards in general, but we don't have townhome design standards. And we also don't have some other design standards for these new types of uses that we're going to break out and talk about. So single-family use, everybody's pretty familiar with. In Oregon City, about 71% of our housing stock is single-family. And some of these pictures, I think all of these pictures are from Oregon City, although the upper left one is probably not. So we're not proposing to, modify single-family zoning at all, other than maybe to simplify some of the setback standards for that sort of thing. Multifamily, currently that's considered 3 or more units on one parcel in the code, and we would be changing the definition of multifamily probably to 5 or 6 units of housing per parcel, and then with things less than that, we would be looking at more specific housing types, such as single-family attached or townhomes, also known as row houses. We have our manufactured home parks, and manufactured homes are a permitted single-family residential use in any single-family zone under state law. So there are going to come out of this process, currently all of our manufactured home parks that are existing, and there are 4 of those in the city, are considered legal non-conforming uses in those zones. So one of the things that's coming out of this process is a recommendation to make those a permitted use so that they can get the funding necessary to keep them and maintain them and that sort of thing. And they do represent a very good housing alternative for these zone districts, as long as there's some minimum residential design standards for these parks. They're clearly an area where it's an important part of our existing housing stock. So I don't anticipate that there would be new manufactured home parks coming out of this process, more means to make those existing uses permitted and provide perhaps some additional units within each park. Multiplexes, so this would be units that have 3, 4, or 5, possibly 6 units maximum per, and they're attached. Come with a set of design standards so that there's some common open space, either privately shared common open space or common open space that's exterior to the building. Duplexes, these are 2 units attached. They could be on a corner. They could be on an interior lot, and they could be built like this, or they could be built with detached garages as well. This is a very nice example of a corner duplex, not in Oregon City, but the overall impression is of a single-family dwelling, but it has entrances that open onto either street, so that that would be a basic design standard in order for you to be able to do a corner duplex. We're considering density bonuses to allow these types of corner duplexes in single-family residential zones with design standards. Internal conversion is an incentive for a homeowner to convert part of their existing single-family residential home into a separate unit. And that would be designed or at least regulated in such a way that it would not incentivize that an existing structure be scraped off in order to accommodate 2 or 3 more new units. We really want to make sure that our housing stock that is built and functioning and otherwise completely sound does not get scraped off to see what you might see in Portland that's been so controversial, which is the scraping off lots to provide a much bigger unit and accommodate bigger units within it. So this is something that is being done in some cities throughout the Portland metro area. It's very similar to an accessory dwelling unit that's inside an existing structure and that sort of thing. And then there's accessory dwelling units, which have been permitted use in our single-family zones ever since 2004, and they can be detached or attached, but we haven't seen too many of them built, and we want to know why that is. Some have been built in whole subdivisions where they've been a permitted use, and the developer built the accessory dwelling units with the houses. So I think about half of the ones that we have in the city now are like that, and others have just been individual homeowners doing this. And then there's the cottage housing or cluster housing, which is a current permitted use. It allows higher density, but it has restrictions on the footprints. It's considered a very attractive housing type, but it is fairly expensive to build, and it has some design standards. And so far, nobody has taken advantage of our cottage housing code. So we're looking at simplifying it and seeing, hopefully, getting some of that going with these amendments. The second round of code amendments was our high-density residential zones, which are apartment zones and zones that are mixed use or commercial that allow apartment uses. So that's the R2 zone, and we're looking at, sorry about this detail on this slide, but expanding residential types allowed in the R2 zone. Currently, the only thing you can do in the R2 zone is apartments. But we're looking at potentially bringing back the allowance for row houses and duplexes, detached structures on the same lot, and that kind of thing. No changes really proposed to our commercial and mixed-use standards. They currently allow multifamily. And with respect to residential design standards for apartments, looking at simplifying some of the current architectural standards, but making sure that we're keeping an architectural design minimum that's important to people, and so that they fit in with our neighborhoods. So the cottage housing type that we talked about, we'll probably be renaming that cluster housing, so it could accommodate not only the traditional cottage housing designs that you saw there with the nice little cottages, but also potentially attached units with duplexes that butt up to a common courtyard or something like that. Here's an example of residential and commercial mixed-use area. We haven't seen any of this type of housing built in Oregon City yet, not even in the downtown areas where it's something that is desired. So we're looking at that. There's another slide of that cottage cluster housing. This is an example of a cluster type development on a courtyard that might be appropriate. So we'd be looking at facilitating that type of housing. This is a sixplex, I believe. This is a traditional garden apartment that you might see in some places. A lot of these have been built in the 40s and 50s in Portland, and it's pretty attractive. Some of them are sixplexes or fourplexes. So that's just some graphics to illustrate some of these ideas. The next step for the committee and our consultants is to continue to refine our design standards, and through the project advisory team, focus on strategies that have the best chance of success and which people feel have the most impact for our city. Then we'll be producing the developer building handouts or the educational handouts, and we're going to do about 8 of those for each of the housing types that our consultants scoped to do. We'll be coming back and presenting to you our mapping when that's ready at the end of April, hopefully going towards later April, early May. And out of this work, there's going to be a lot of things that are not within the scope of our consultant and really require input from a lot of other departments before we can tackle them, if they're going to be recommendations that we want to pursue at all. And that's, for example, system development charges, because currently we have system development charges that are based on a very, very sound methodology and how housing units impact our public infrastructure. So if we're going to make any changes to our system development charges, we want to make sure that it's fair and that impacts are definitely being offset by the right SDCs for transportation, sewer, water, parks, and that sort of thing. And we are also looking at our review processes as far as interdepartmental coordination between planning, building, and public works, so that a developer or an applicant knows exactly what to expect in terms of timeline when they go into the permitting process. And that will be part of the educational materials. The next project advisory team meeting, and which is open to the public, will be May 1st at Pioneer Center at 6 p.m. And then we have scheduled a public open house May 15th at the public library from 5 to 8 p.m. So we do have a project website, which is listed here, www.orcity.org/planning/equitable-housing. And there's a link to it directly from the planning homepage. You can also email me at this email address here or call me. We have a sign-up list on a mailing list, so if you go to the website and type in your email address, you'll get automatic updates for all of our project advisory team meetings. Thank you very much.
Does anybody have any questions for Pete?
Yeah.
So, kind of specifically vague question, I guess. Is there a number that you're kind of shooting for that is residential versus multifamily in this city? You know, that, is there?
We don't have a specific number, no. I think in terms of what Metro would like to see the city accomplish is some policy recommendations and some clear indication that we've taken every possible opportunity to remove any barriers that are really unnecessary in our zoning code. Other things that contribute to a shortage of housing, they understand that are really beyond the city's control. But, you know, as I mentioned earlier, we do have a lot of single-family residential zoning within those zoning area and housing types. And within those housing types, there are opportunities for additional compatible accessory dwelling units, for example. And I think part of the issue is that people may not be aware of them. And since they're not aware of them, they're not building them.
Yeah.
But we want to make sure that this is as clear and transparent a process as possible for people.
Yes, I didn't know if you got into, you know, if we annex some property,
Right.
you know, that,
That's good.
what should we zone that? You know, well, gee, we're kind of short on multifamily, should we go to so I didn't know how you did that.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. Within our 3 concept plan areas, that are areas within the urban growth boundary that are not yet annexed to the city, all 3 of those are decidedly more diverse in zoning than some of the existing areas of the city. So we are going to see some higher density and mixed-use housing types in those areas that are ultimately annexed and developed in the city.
Okay.
And a lot of thought and effort went into where those areas ought to go as well, so that they would not only be providing a range of housing types, but that they would be close to amenities, so that they're located on the right transportation corridor, right next to an area that would provide services to them and schools and that sort of thing. So that is a big factor as well. And all 3 of the concept plan areas have that process.
Do we know, last question is,
Sure.
do we know what our percentage of folks living in multifamily versus single family is, what that percentage is now, or citizens?
Oh, I had a slide for that, and I'll be happy to share it with you.
That's what I was
It's from a prior presentation.
Okay.
I don't have the figure, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, I want to say about 10% maybe, but I could be wrong on that.
I just wonder, because you've got 70% single family,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
there's 30% multifamily, so just wonder if it,
Yeah, we have, like, the McLaughlin neighborhood is actually quite a diverse neighborhood in terms of housing types, because there's been so much renovation and conversion over the years. And so some of the unit types that you see coming out of the McLaughlin neighborhood they fall into the categories of duplexes, 3plexes, 4plexes, and that sort of thing. But in terms
Yeah.
of apartment uses, it's fairly limited.
okay,
Yeah, I'll get back to
that's
you on
fine.
that.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Pete. Yeah.
I have one question.
Sure.
On the 6 zones that you
Oh,
mentioned,
yeah.
are they specified on the website?
When you dig in to the very first round of code amendments, so if you go to the project advisory team meeting for the very first one, it's in there. I'm talking about the residential zones, not the mixed-use zones. So there you have the low-density residentials, and yeah, they are.
Along you've got a good wide menu of things to choose from.
Yes.
How does that menu break down into equitable, affordable, and, that's kind of a tough one. You can have the zoning and the requirements and the incentives, but how do they keep from building a McMansion out of everything at every zone and take you right out of the ballpark?
Yeah, that's a really difficult question. I think part of the answer lies in just facilitating supply, and conversion of existing housing may not really tackle that problem, but it'll help. I think some of the biggest dent in the housing supply problem we can resolve through new land and development of annexation areas and that sort of thing. But I think depending on what comes out of this process, and it is an ambitious process, and it's going to require a lot of, I think, conscientious thinking on the part of everybody in the city, because we really want to think about this in a community, as part of what builds community in Oregon City is providing a diversity of housing. I think homeowners will want to take advantage of these incentives if they are in the code. And it's clear that there are some barriers in the code to doing some of these things. So I've heard from several builders that said, yeah, clearly, if this was a permitted use, I would do it. Such as the cottage housing thing, for example. They might want a slightly bigger footprint rather than limited to 600 square feet, but, those are concrete questions that they can ask through the process and say, well, this is going to pencil for me, this is not. We'll be exploring that question as we move forward. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
You touched on it a little bit, but I think there'll be a question at the end of this, but I apologize. But I'm a big fan of cottage housing. Because of the business that I'm in, I follow housing trends nationwide, and that's one of the hottest things going on. Plus, I'd like to live in one of them here coming up pretty soon, And I had assumed, because nobody's building them, that our code didn't allow for them. And I'm embarrassed when I did find out that it is in there and just nobody's building them. So I had an occasion to talk to the folks that built the house that built our house now, and said, why aren't you doing these things? And the obvious answer, and it's exactly what you just said, it doesn't pencil out. But the question that I have, being inside the urban growth boundary and the limited supply of land and how much the dirt costs and how much the SDCs and all the infrastructure that they have to do, it really comes down to how much can we incentivize the builder to the point, or make it easier to build to the point that it does make sense to them, rather than do R6 and a 2,500 square foot house, right? Isn't that kind of thing? Because they're in it to make money, and they're going to do what pencils out, and if it doesn't pencil out, they're not going to do it.
Yeah, and I think they're also looking for a clear path to a permit.
Yeah.
And if there's a lot of ifs and, I don't know if it'll get approved or not, that's part of it. But you're right, there are many costs that go into building a profitable housing project. The price of the land, system development charges, what can you get a loan on? One of the things I did not mention was that we're going to put together a fee estimator that would include all the things that we know a developer will be responsible for that are city requirements, and also, places for them to punch in numbers for soft costs that they are going to have to provide for public infrastructure, for consultant costs, because we require that they get certain types of consultants, surveyors, civil engineers, geotechnical engineers, architects, landscape architects, wetland consultants. Those are all listed professions in the city code that some people don't know they have to hire those people. So those are some of the things we're going to look at. And it's like, you'd be surprised at how many things people don't know about that they're going to be faced with from beginning to end in a permitting process. So to that extent, the fee estimator will be a big help, I think.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Roy?
Yeah, I put my card up and then Mike was going right down the line of thought I was having. And I thought you was gonna answer, but then you went off on another direction. And that is there any kind of incentive to the builders that could steer them towards building the type of housing you're looking for? I mean, and I work in construction myself too. I'm not a developer or anything, but I see all the fees and stuff people have, and they're aware of that. Maybe not everything, but they're still going to have to make money at the end of the day or their crews don't work anymore. So if they have a choice between building a cottage house or building the single-family home, they're gonna do what keeps them, available for the next job.
Sure.
So is there any kind of way that the city can get grants or any kind of incentives for building this type of housing?
Well, I think it's a difficult question. If you're talking about apartments, there may be some grant money coming from the state and from Metro in the future to do apartment houses and that sort of thing. Already there are some state incentives for affordable housing for multifamily that the city can take advantage of. But for this process, it's fairly limited scope. We're going to be doing some educational materials. We're going to look at our code. We're going to provide these educational materials, and we're going to do some maps. And then on the heels of that, at the end of the adoption process, there'll be some other recommendations that for further work, like.
So it's a little bit beyond the scope of what this is going to
Yeah, it
be.
really is. Yeah.
Great.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Well, I just want to say, I looked into it. I live in the McLaughlin neighborhood, tearing my garage down. And just the amount of work to get approval to tear down your designated structure, to build the new one that's acceptable, to pay the $3,500 to get your lot surveyed because it hasn't been done since 1846. No exaggeration. I mean, I started looking at it, and before I could even tear down my garage, I was going to be $25,000 in SDC fees, permit fees, and that wasn't even getting rid of my old garage to build one. It's just this amount. You know how long you have to rent something to get back $25,000?
Right. Yeah.
Then I started looking into solar, because you put solar, you get tax rebates for building a structure that's going to house solar as long as it's a certain amount of square footage. It's overwhelming, at least in my neighborhood, to even think about it. I mean, I was $100 and something thousand into it, and I can make more money putting $100,000 somewhere else.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean.
And not have someone live in my backyard.
There are any number of accessory dwelling unit guides out there from multiple jurisdictions, and we're not going to try to reinvent the wheel, but we are going to adapt the very best of what those brochures have, and with estimated costs for the construction of these types of units so that people would know, is the long-term benefit of rental income per month really going to be worth the cost of construction on these projects and that sort of thing. So I understand.
Okay. All right, thank you, Pete.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pete.
Do we have any public comments?
I have not received any.
Okay. Moving on, staff liaison updates for questions from the last meeting. Christina?
All right, just real quickly, Pete Walter's presentation, I can send an email of that, and then he can get back to me on the question about Commissioner Shaw's about percentage of renters. So I'll get those two information back. I have quite a number of updates today. I'll go real quickly. Susie Peterson's contact information is available on the Backyard Habitat Program. Reminder, neighbor association meetings on the city calendar. If they are incorrect or if they've changed, you've changed locations or dates, please email Katie Riggs. Each month, I update the back of the agenda on the neighbor association meetings based on what's on the website that morning. So if it's not changed on the morning that the agenda gets sent out, what's on your agenda will be incorrect. So just always make sure and double check and send any updates to Katie Riggs. CIC roster has been updated on the CIC page. There was a question about postcards, and I had a good conversation with Katie Riggs, and she provided a recommendation on how to ensure that you have the best date for when your postcard goes out. So we use South End as an example, but she says that it varies between the business days it takes for her to review it, when she sends it to Buell's, and when Buell sends it to a third party to mail it out. So she recommended that when you send your postcard to Katie, you provide her the meeting date and then the date you want the postcards to get in the mailbox. And then you can work back from there. So if both Katie Buell's and the third-party mailer have that date, they can use that as their estimated date they can work around. And so she said that would probably be a test this year if all the neighborhoods that are doing postcards could use that. We can kind of test and see if that works better. Neighborhood association notice requirements was asked, and I provided the whole municipal code on neighborhood association. And two things I wanted to bring up. One, it is identified that the applicant provides a certified letter to the neighborhood association, but over the years, many neighborhood associations said, we don't need a certified letter, send the email. And I've realized over the time we haven't kept a good list of who wants certified letter and who wants email. So go back to your neighborhood association, ask how you best want to receive requests for neighborhood meetings from applicants, from developers and applicants, and let me know. And I can put up kind of create a little list that I can give the planners at the pre-application conference so they know, like, this is this neighborhood and this is how they want to be contacted. And secondly, if there is a requirement to send the CIC notice for any neighborhood association meetings, and we do let the applicant know that they need to do that. And I was speaking to Amy, I can make sure that at the time of completeness that we check back as planners to make sure that was done. Because if there are meetings that are being missed, we want to make sure to know that. We let the applicant know at the pre-application meeting, but we should probably do a better job of making sure that they have sent the CIC the notice.
Yeah, because I can tell you that I've probably gotten 3 or 4 in the 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can definitely make sure that's
Definitely
part of the
more than that
completeness review.
I've not received a single one for Two Rivers.
And then finally, the neighborhood association handout. I provide an electronic version on the agenda. I updated it with this year's meetings, but maybe wait a week or two, we make sure everyone's meetings are correct. And then if your neighborhood wants me to print out copies, I can print each neighborhood up to 50 copies if you want to hand out at your next meeting. Just send me a personal email. Review to make sure that your neighborhood association meetings dates are correct. And then I can print those off and leave them at will call at the City Hall, or I can bring them to the May CIC meeting.
And along with that, just a reminder that and I'll send you an email too, but to double check for Hazel Grove Westling Farms, that all notifications need to go to the CIC. And then on that meetings thing, it says that they're currently holding meetings with or something like that. It just needs to, we need to say that they're invited to the South End meeting, but it's not an official Hazel Grove meeting. So we can work on the wording of that.
Okay, let me write this down. Okay.
prioritizing our work plan. Last month, we went over our goals that we have, and from that, it looked like we had agreed that we would get quickly working on better understanding our roles as CIC members and neighborhood associations, and what that looks like coming to this meeting, what that looks like interacting with the neighborhood, what the neighborhood's role is in providing information to the city and from the city. So that a lot of that will take place at our May meeting. Kristen Brown will come. We could talk with her about her plans and goals and ideas as far as public involvement and communication. And then Christine will give us some updates on understanding our relationship. Hopefully, if we can all understand that, that would be great. So that was the first, we were going to jump on that. Developing resources for our neighborhood associations to help reactivate and inactive ones or underperforming neighborhoods. So I noticed that you had handed out our public involvement plan.
We have a lot of new CIC members, so I want to make sure everyone has a hard copy
Yeah.
of the public involvement.
So the
plan.
public involvement plan, when we created it, this was, hopefully you'll take this and if you need more copies for your chairs and your vice chairs, this is something that would be a great thing to bring out at your steering committee meetings and talk about, hey, if you've noticed that your attendance is low, or maybe people are saying, hey, we're not feeling that we're involved, or maybe there's something more we could do. This is some good talking points and things to help with ideas. And it also kind of talks about what are our priorities and goals, and so it's a great tool that we have. And then, so it looks like we'll be working on that probably July and August. And then our favorite topic, grievances. So I sent out an email, and I've heard back from a few of you with some of the questions that I had that I would, hoping we could have a discussion about. Unfortunately, it's in really small print. So we've kind of talked about what the history of it. And then one of my questions that I asked, and I'm looking for your feedback, is what do you think is the benefit of processing grievances through the CIC, and how does it help further our goals? So is there anyone that's thought about that would like to share their thoughts?
I wrote some stuff down, I just gotta find it.
Okay. I think some of what I've heard, our grievances are, we want to help the neighborhoods. And we obviously, as a CIC, don't want to be, if someone has a problem, we want to be able to listen to them. So that was, that's kind of a benefit, as it gives an opportunity to discuss and to talk. Did you find yours?
Yeah, so that was the second question, I believe it was, that you had on the list.
The first one, what do you think is the benefit of processing grievances through the CIC? And how does it help further the goals and purposes?
So for the first question, the benefit of it, I had noted that it provides us feedback if what we're doing is actually working, whether or not we're doing the job in a fair and impartial manner and what we're supposed to be doing. Because if we're not doing that, somebody's gonna get grieved, I guess. I also noticed that it lets the CIC know that we are actually doing what we're doing. So those were the main things I had pointed out for number one. And it furthers our goal by just providing feedback for us, letting us know that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing.
Okay. Anybody else have any thoughts they want to share on that? Linda?
I've been a part of a grievance to come through there. And I see all of these nicely written out that was there, that someone went to a lot of effort doing this. The parties should seek mediation very beginning to see if they could get things done. Lots of the people here, they really don't want mediation. They just want to complain loudly to come through there. We had a grievance in our neighborhood, and there were 600 hours that the CIC put in that. It was presented, the findings were there. After that, the parties went and filed a lawsuit against the city. That cost the city $10,000. Nothing came through there. After that, the people went to a city commissioning meeting, like this is all brand new business, no one ever heard about that. The final thing they did was they actually came to a meeting, a neighborhood meeting, which at that time, that's what the bylaws said you should have done. So they presented what they wanted to do for grievance. The vote was taken. It was 29-1, I believe, was the count that no, the neighborhood did not want to hear this grievance. There was nothing there. They didn't want to hear it. Just go on with other things. If you look at the CIC findings for all of these here, we can't do anything. We're all on hold because we're all been appointed by the mayor. That tells me they don't want any type of mediation. They don't want to resolve this. They just want to complain. This is something they can hold to the flag. Oh, we've got a grievance. I think it's a waste of our time for these things. Maybe there's other people what could be done, but all of these just look like it's a hopeless waste of time.
Okay.
I'll give that a partial echo. When we were trying to revise the old bylaws, the intent of the grievance process was someone could grieve an act of the CIC. That means as a body, we vote and take action, and someone feels that they're harmed, harmed by that action. Everything that has been grieved so far is interpersonal. There is no act of the CIC. And I think as we move forward on this, we may want to get back to that original intent, that it was to allow people to come forward if we make some outlandish decision that harms them.
Okay. You look like you want to say something.
I do, but if Vern wants to.
Oh, Vern.
Vern looks like he's ready.
I guess the framework of how grievances, the steps we want the parties to take, and Linda hit on it as far as mediation. It appears mediation is an option, but I don't know the history that Linda knows. But it appears that everybody, or most everybody, has rejected the mediation avenue. And they come directly to CIC with it, and we, the representatives of CIC, not being too many of us an expert on how to solve grievances, and the county has groups that will do that, and sometimes they have no charge for it, depending on what it is. Sometimes there may be a small charge, sometimes it'll be waived. Would it be more beneficial to us to change that lead-in that it suggested you go to mediation? It is required you go to mediation before we will take it on. Now, that may be harsh on the edges a little bit, but get the more appropriate information from the professionals that do that daily.
Okay.
I agree with what
You're banging.
Linda said. Sorry, I agree with what Linda said and with what Karen said and what Vern said. But the question that I keep asking myself, and I haven't heard a good answer to, this neighborhood associations are to disseminate information up and down and to advise. And this group is to disseminate information and advise. We don't make land use decisions. The Historic Review Board, the Planning Commission, the City Commission make the decisions. What can a neighborhood association or the CIC do that harms somebody? I don't get it. We advise.
That's the perfect question.
We don't have the power to do anything that affects anybody, really. We advise. And those guys have to decide. No, I'm pointing at you, Commissioner Shaw, I'm pointing at you. So that's what I don't understand the purpose. But
So-
I have one little tiny thing that might be the purpose.
Uh-oh.
I did some checking with other cities.
Okay.
And I found something that the city of Portland has that's their grievance thing.
Is this for their citizens?
This is for their neighborhood associations. This is their grievance policy. And it says, it's a complaint formally expressed in writing by an individual